Hey guys, welcome to Franklin Woodworks. I'm going to make a rustic farmhouse table out of plywood. What? They said it couldn't be done. They said it shouldn't be done. But I decided to do it anyway. I'm going to make a farmhouse table out of plywood. It's not that difficult of a concept, really. I'm just going to cut pieces of cabinet-grade plywood into random width strips, mix them all up, and glue them back together. The idea is that it should look just like glued-up solid wood. Easy. There are some design challenges, however, such as edge-gluing plywood. So first, I put down some tape on my cut lines and used a newly sharpened finishing blade to make my cuts. This ensured there was no tear out. Since a ton of sanding was not an option due to the thin veneer on the plywood, I had to get the pieces to line up when it was time to glue things up. I accomplished this by using dowels. This was easy. Time-consuming, but easy. The dowels will make the joints strong enough, but I've also got to make sure that the joints are really tight so moisture will not get into the joints, causing the plywood to swell or even delaminate. A trick I learned was to spread a really thin layer of glue on the edge of the plywood and let it sit for a few minutes, maybe 5 to 8 minutes, just to give the glue a chance to soak into the edge and start to tack up. I'm using Titebond 3 not only because of the longer open time, but on a kitchen table, a little extra protection from moisture couldn't hurt. Anyway, after the glue starts to tack up, I spread glue again as I normally would, pound the pieces together, and add clamps. After my first glue up, I discovered an issue with using dowels on the edges of plywood. The dowels are designed to fit tight, really tight. So tight that the plywood will split when you seat the dowels. To fix this problem, I just touched the dowels on a sander on opposite sides to create an oval shape. Now I can seat the dowels in the correct orientation that only puts the extreme pressure in a direction that doesn't cause the plywood to split. In an extreme case of lack of foresight, I also discovered that I didn't have the clamps to glue the entire width of the tabletop. So I had to get creative in order to pull the pieces in tight. One design feature of this table is that the outside pieces of the tabletop need to be shorter than all the rest, but they need to be placed perfectly. By keeping the dowel pattern the same on each glue-up, I was able to cut them to length and glue them in without any worry that the placement would be off. And a great byproduct of this design is that these outside pieces are also the exact same length as the long aprons. So once I was set up to cut the shorter outside pieces for the tabletop, I went ahead and cut the aprons so they matched exactly. Since I wanted the table to look like walnut, I used General Finishes Antique Walnut Gel Stain. And this was about 90% successful. There were some spots on the plywood where the stain hardly soaked in at all. Even hitting those spots with coarse sandpaper didn't help, and that was going to be a problem. As a last resort, I got some Varathane walnut stain and poly all in one. This product saved the day. Now, I've used the product before, and I hated it when I used it as a primary stain coat. But adding this product over stain gave me the rustic look I was aiming for. The legs for the table are some really old 6x6s that I used in my garden for the last 8 years. I cut off all the outside crud and trued them up, and this left me with about a 4x4 leg. I used the walnut gel stain on the legs, and the color was surprisingly good. I used dowels to put the base of the table together, and again the lack of clamps was an incredible lack of foresight. If my father-in-law hadn't been there to help, this would have been a real disaster. But I got the base together, and I really didn't worry about squareness because the tabletop will take care of that. So I put the top in place, put in the final apron, and let the glue on the table base joints dry before I went any further. Now this table is 7 feet long, and I'm not going to use any kind of traditional bracing for the bottom. To make sure the table doesn't sag, the aprons are 5/4 walnut with a width of 5 inches. To give me even more insurance, I used my remaining plywood to make a laminated beam that will run the length of the table in the center. So I think you could park a truck on this table. The plywood is only 3/4 inches thick, and I want it to look thicker. So I cut some 1.5 inch wide trim pieces out of walnut and glued and tacked them into place. For the finish, I used Varathane triple thick water-based poly for the legs and aprons. And for the top, I used General Finishes high-performance water-based top coat. I put 8 coats on the top, sanding lightly in between each coat. The table was an even bigger success than I anticipated. I did go a little overboard with the poly, mainly because I know that sanding down plywood and restaining isn't much of an option should there ever be any damage. I wanted to have plenty of finish to sand into if the finish gets damaged, so repair would be a snap. All I have to do now is figure out a way to get this 3-foot wide table from my shop into the kitchen. Well, life would be boring without challenges, even if the challenges are self-inflicted. And my life is definitely not boring. Kind and thoughtful comments are always welcome, as is liking and sharing this video. Subscribe if you have a mind to, and feel free to watch this over and over again. Hope this gives you some good ideas to try in your shop. Thanks for watching, and there you go.